Hello, everyone. Let's just jump right into the second part of the presentation, which Pavel has for us. You'd think that Pavel is capable with these kind of things, because I'm totally not. So all the nice stuff that you're seeing, Pavel. And what we're going to look at through the presentation is a couple of things which I believe we mentioned last time, but are worth bringing up again and again and again, because those are the fundamental principles of ICM play. And the more we look at them and the more we understand how they function, the better we become at actually executing strategies in game. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the presentation, talk a little bit about these things, clarify any questions, and then during the second part, we'll go through some hand histories. We have a hand with a bunch of node logs from Pentaculator, and maybe we'll look at some more, but let's see how it goes. So first things first, we have tight opens, less shoving, even for shallow stacks. This is one of my all-time favorite things in terms of playing high risk premium scenarios, and the reason that is because even to this day, a lot less than a couple of years ago, but to this day, you see a lot of people getting this part wrong. And I think a lot of people get it wrong because of how it functions, even psychologically in a way. So if you're a short stack on a final table, here we're looking at a final table screenshot on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we're looking at chip EV scenario for a middle position opening range. If you're on a final table and you're a short stack and there is a lot of risk premium on you, pretty much always, or okay, nothing is always in poker, but 99% of the time, what will happen is you're going to play a very tight VPIP range. And because you're playing a very, very tight VPIP range, you end up open jamming a lot less. Usually the purpose of, and the reason why is, again, we're always trying to think of why things happen. So why does a jamming range occur in certain scenarios, and how much EV do certain hand categories generate or a whole range generate, etc. That's what the solver does. The solver is just a calculator, right? So when you're playing a very tight range, because what in a chip environment will be considered the bottom of your range, now you don't need to shove because the EV of your total VPIP range is much higher, and the equity of this range is much higher. So we see that here we have a 12 big blind empty open. In chip EV, we see 8, 7, 6s, 5s getting in there, ace 9 offsuit, king 9, queen 9. All of those hands are the outside portion of a range, and they have naturally a lot less equity versus range compared to the rest of it. Since we can't open these because they're too marginal, and because in ICM folding makes us money when other people's collude, what happens is that the net equity of our total range is so much higher that we don't need to force folds out of other opponents. We just want to open. If we face aggression, we're just going to stack off whatever top part of our range, depending on stack distributions. And we're just going to yield a lot more that way rather than expanding and trying to push a lot of all-ins. Because if we start pushing a lot of all-ins, two things are going to happen. A, we're going to be just VPing way too much and burning money in doing so. Or B, we're going to be shoving hands which don't get the value that they have. Let's say in this scenario, you have 12 bigs, you start open jamming queens, you're just executing the suboptimal play in terms of how much EV you can gain with that hand. Does all of that make sense? Or am I just rambling too much and talking theoretical mumbo jumbo?
It always makes sense. I would just add that we also giving ourselves chance to get out from the hand if we min raising, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're not min raise stacking off ace 6 suited, or ace 7 suited, or king jack offsuit, etc.
Yeah, and we can even fold some strong hands like ace queen suited if the two people behind us go all in. So
Yeah, I don't think we have that in the presentation, but since you mentioned it, it's worth pointing out that usually if you're in a high risk premium scenario, let's say a final table, if you're going to be making a bet which commits you to an all-in, let's say an open shove or maybe a 3-bet, always go for not, instead of putting all the money in, go for a sizing which is committing but allows you to fold if a lot of action happens. If you have more than one live range behind, let's say cutoff opens, we're the button, we want to reshove, doesn't matter, stacks, whatever, we know we have a hand which is going to be going all in. Let's say we have 20 bigs, we don't just put the 20 bigs in, we make it like 11 bigs. And in the extremely rare scenario where small blind wakes up with aces and the cutoff puts it in, we can just still get away, because in that scenario, if that happens, very often we'll only want to be stacking off kings and aces, maybe even aces only. You know, it really depends. Just a tiny little thing, but it has saved more than one final table of mine, and it's just a pretty much free dollar EV that you can gain from. Just make sure to not make it too small, and make sure to not do it versus a recreational where you think you're doing this very smart thing where you're raising 40% of your stack and you have this guy who has no clue what's going on, has Jack 10 suited and just figures, oh, it's not all in, I'm going to throw in a call. You don't want that. Just make sure that you're not giving somebody who doesn't understand what's going on a price which they think is good. Anyways, tight opens, less shoves, very important. And here we have another example where we've got a 15 big blind scenario, but then this is the ICM scenario, final table sim. This is chip EV. Again, we still have, now this is a button, you know, remember the previous slide was MP, so there was significantly less shoving. Here being the button, we still have a fair bit of shoving, you know, it's the stack size, the right stack size, etc. But it is less shoving still, and the opening range is different, right? This is pretty common. And another thing is, although usually we really like blockers, and we'll talk about that in a bit, ace deuce, ace three offsuit, usually not very good for VPPing first in. And the other thing in terms of compositions, which is very important and very common as well with these stack sizes like sub 20 big blinds, the way a shoving versus opening range is constructed usually works so that offsuit aces become good raise folds because they block reshoving ranges, and instead we tend to shove more suited portion. So you can see that here, like here, GPV, queen jack suited, open the button, call versus anyone, we're happy to get it in, whatever. ICM, high risk premiums, we don't want to allow people to reshove with ace deuce suited. So what we do is we open the offsuit aces that block the reshoves, and they're folds if we get reshoved on, and we shove these hands. The other thing is, in an open, you know, in the GPV environment, if we open shove these hands, we get called wider. So these hands also have more equity versus the calling range, etc. Whereas here, if we open shove, we get called. We aren't liking it. And again, another thing in terms of shoving, I believe we mentioned that last time. Again, very common misconception of people. People just are scared with the short stack. They don't want to bust. They end up shoving. Whereas it goes the other way around. If we are the big stack and we can put a lot of pressure, the very, very common way to do that, and it happens like up to 30 bigs, you see a lot of that depending on stack distributions. But if you just remember that open shoving is used more often as the covering stack, you'd be good enough. Usually the way range constructions work is, again, a lot of suited, and then you start out and you have some offsuit broadways, you have some of these here. Even here with a massive shoving range on the button, you can still see that we have this open raising from here. It's just really, really important to think of blockers and how those function. Right, and blockers. Blockers are my favorite part of poker. It's the most fun you can ever have. So two different sims. We're looking at EP RFI and a button RFI. Here the EP has 34 bigs, a bunch of different stacks covered by a lot of people, very tight opening range, and you fold sevens and you fold jack nine and you fold 10-9, but you open almost every ace. And here we have a button 26 covered by both blinds. You know, similar story, low pockets, not good. All of these pretty suited hands, which at 25 bigs will be beeping. Nope. So again, we spoke of it last time. And just in general, if you're trying to, apart from just remembering straight up that you generally want to be opening blocker heavy with like sub 30, 40 bigs on a final table or in high risk premium scenarios, a very useful way of thinking about it is you're in a spot and you're sitting there and you're thinking, what should I do? What should I do? Try to think, how often am I going post flop compared to how often does this hand end with A, everybody folding, or B, somebody 3-bets. And that's how you understand whether to use linear ranges or blocker heavy ranges pre-flop. If you're going to be seeing a lot of post flop action, you want to have more playable hands. If you're going to see less post flop action and more 3-betting, be it non-all-in 3-betting or reshoving, you want to open more blockers. Very, very good heuristic to, again, figure out things on the go. Anything to add, Pablo? Am I missing something? No, no questions. Starting to get a little sweaty here. Nobody says a thing. Are there still people listening? Okay, jokes aside. And more blocker stuff. And this may look funny to some of you, but let's see. So we're looking at two different final table sims. In both scenarios, we're looking at small blind play versus button open. You can see the opening ranges at the bottom and the response ranges at the top. I remember the very first time Pablo and I saw this in a sim, and we thought for a good long while that something must be wrong with the bloody sim. And what I mean is this thing here. It's just so unnatural for the way we used to think about a game, right? You have a button opening range, and you're sitting there in the small blind, and you have 8s, and you're like, nah, I fold. But you have 4s, and you're like, yeah, all in. So what it comes to show is, again, the relevance of blockers. Extremely, extremely important. What is happening here, and the reason why this range looks so friggin' wonky, is that if we look at the button RFI range, we can see that it is really heavy in offsuit ace-x, right about down to ace-5-0. And here is what you get, right? So we're not jamming these because they block a very high frequency of offsuit and suited combos, which raise fold. And then we add in some 6s. There's still a fair bit of 6x here, but in the 6x offsuit, which is not full frequency. And then ace-5, similar story, a lot of offsuit, but then losing here. And then 4s are the first hand from 9s downwards, which actually does not block raise folding ranges. Because when you look at the calling range versus a reshove, whether you have 4s or 8s, doesn't really matter. You are either flipping or you are dominated by an overpair. And what you really want to be thinking of is, do I block folding ranges? Do I block raise folding range? Do I block raise calling range? And then once you understand that, you can go very far in terms of adjusting versus specific opponents, especially if you play the same fields, you play the same opponents more often. If you can start taking notes and understand how people structure their ranges and how they think about things, you can really, really adjust your strategy to a point where they have no clue what you're doing. And you can really generate additional EV by the fact that, let's say, you know that someone is just jamming way too much of these aces, you know, and then if they're jamming too much aces, this means that when they open, their range construction looks in a certain way, where, like, is it possible that they don't have enough raise calls? Is it possible that they have roughly a decent ratio in terms of raise folds and raise calls, but their raise calls come from a different part of the range, etc., etc., etc. I'm just gonna, ooh, we have something here. Perpendicular, I think. Most stakes people still over defend big blind and ICM scenarios, so I think we have to be cautious going extreme on blockers, maybe. Ooh, Discord chat. I totally forgot about Discord chat as well, so don't sweat it. I was looking at Zoom. Yeah, don't worry, but I was doing the same thing. So yeah, indeed, that was a very good point. Pentacular brought up that a lot of people still over defend their big blind in high risk premium ICM scenarios, which would make us want to maybe not lean as much towards blockers. However, again, depends on the scenarios. If we're short stacked, as in these scenarios here, I believe even if they call too much, we still want to go with blockers, because our like sub 20 bigs, our main concern is not getting pushed out of equity and not getting reshoved on. So blockers, in my mind, will still be more efficient. Of course, this can be tested more extensively with some no locking. Yeah, exactly. You want top pairs even if you get called. You want hands you can stack, because you're so shallow. Like a 6-5 is not going to be too good for you in that scenario anyways. Right. Same thing on the right hand side. Again, one thing which Pavel actually brought to my attention while we were looking at these before we start the seminar. Really cool to see again in that portion that jacks are pure shoving, but tens are mostly non-all-in free betting. Can anybody try to venture a guess why that is? Also, the ace deuce ace three, great non-all-in free bets, or just three bet shoves in general, shallow stacks. Ace deuce and ace three offsuit are an all-time ICM favorite for three betting. But let's just focus on that. Why are tens non-all-in free betting and jacks are pure shoving? This is the opening range. This is the reshove range or response range. Anybody? Yes, no, maybe? I don't know. I can repeat the question. Stupid Malcolm references from the 90s. Oh boy. Right. Drinking water. Someone is typing so I can drink water. Range reaction versus three bet, yeah. It is. It is. The thing it is range reaction, and the type of range reaction that we're talking about is that if you look at this range, if you like what pockets is the button here stacking off, you know, these are mostly going to be shoves. That's why we don't see them full frequency. And nines is the first pocket which stacks full frequency, and some of these may even be folding. If you jam tens, you're probably seeing fives fold. And if you three bet them, you see fives and fours jam, which is great. And to confirm that, we can actually, where is my Mozilla? Let's try to find that. So 40, 18, 12. ICM, 6 max. 40, where is it? Pablo. Where's the sim?
8 max. Isn't it?
There we go. Was it 8 max?
I think, yeah.
Oh, it is 8 max. All right, 40, 18, 12. There you go. Let's hope I'm right. Button versus small blind. Yeah, see, we have folds here, we have folds here, but we have jams from here. And if you go versus 3-bet all in, all of this is folding. So what you're trying to do there with this strategy is to get these hands in there, which is in a way a very common heuristic, even for GPV scenarios, where it's a good idea, generally speaking, to induce the bottom of your getting range. Because if you're at the bottom of your getting range, if you put it in, just reshove it, you don't gain anything if villain has you beat. Let's say you're in a spot where the bottom of your getting range is ace jack offsuit, and you have ace jack offsuit there, and you're like, oh, this is my getting range, I'm gonna go all in. You go all in. If the other player has ace king, you're getting stacked anyways. But on the other hand, if the other player has ace five, you go all in, they fold. But if you instead go for the induced sizing, they're gonna 4-bet put it in with like the ace fives, the ace fours, etc., etc. So this thing is at play here. Just a nice little funny thing to keep in mind. But I gotta start going through the slides because we have to have time for the hands, and I'm slow and talking a lot. So I'll try to be quick. Very little calling below 30 BB. I believe we mentioned that last time, but again, commonly misconceived scenario where it's just very intuitive. We used to playing a lot of calls facing opens, and with high risk premiums, what we began with, which is that our equity thresholds are much higher, which means that all the calling that we're used to from GPV just becomes redundant, and we play a very, very heavy 3-bet only strategy. And you see, like, you have like no calling here. This is cutoff versus R5 from hijack. In this scenario here, we have button versus R5 from hijack, where again, like, we're covered in both of these scenarios. There's just no calling. You're not trying to flick in a call with queen jack suited, because especially if you're covered, like, if you can maybe make arguments in some scenarios, but you're covered, you're in a lot of pressure. You just don't want to, like, the hands that naturally want to call just don't have the equity to call, so they don't. There could be a exception to that, because we're also playing poker. The sims that we're looking at are static, and there is FGS, there are a lot of things. So we're not saying don't ever call, but we're saying, okay, this is what the calculator thinks is an equilibrium within the independent chip model. And then understanding that and adjusting from here is a better way to go than just playing your natural GPV ranges. There are a lot of scenarios where, let's say you're here on the button, you have 26 bigs, hijack opens, it's pretty tough spot, blinds cover you. But if this guy is a recreational and the blinds are passive, by all means, call queen jack suited, call queen 10, call king 10 suited, try to play poker versus people that you think you can outplay post flop. Just keep in mind that you're not supposed to, which doesn't mean that you should never do it. Again, just a calculator, no two spots are the same. It's a very dynamic game. A bit more calling deeper. Here we have, again, two sims. One is cutoff versus MP. You have cutoff, 32 bigs versus 60 opener. And here we have button versus low jack 42, button 35. Like this one here, you start seeing a more natural calling range develop. And as we go above 35 bigs, the way calling ranges will work are, just imagine you're calling from a few positions earlier, and you're still 3-betting a lot of blockers, as is normal with when you expect a lot of 4-betting and you just want to block top of ranges. There is one, or not one, but a general idea where you see a lot more calling, and that's if you're playing big stack versus big stack, massive risk premiums that go both ways. In these scenarios, you're generally going to be super passive. So what we're saying here about little calling and a little bit more above 30, we're looking at below 30, not much calling. Let's say 30 to 40-ish, there is some calling. And then if you're both 70 bigs and they're 5 stacks, 10 bigs, you just don't want to play against each other. There you will only be calling. That's a completely different story. Just as a note. Same thing with 3-betting, no calling. This is actually a very good one too, because you see a lot of mistakes with it. Like you see, because it's just not intuitive to play. If you have 30 bigs and you're facing a small 3-bet, because usually sizings are smaller, it feels really stupid to be folding like queen, jack suited and that type of hand. But as a general rule, it will serve you much better if you go for the idea that you just are not looking to be playing calling ranges with like 30 to 40 bigs versus 3-bets in general, because in that scenario in GPV, what happens is that you're playing a lot of marginal equity and EV hands to protect your range from being exploited. And it's very easy for those marginal hands to become losing with the risk premium on top of that. And also, since it's quite realistic and quite common for bigger stacks to overdo 3-betting, the way to punish people who 3-bet a lot is to just 4-bet into them. That's just a very fundamental approach, very general approach, not even related to ICM, just how it works. And on the flip side, big stacks get to call a lot more, they get to open a lot more. Similar stuff to what we already spoke. Even as a big stack, if you're opening a lot, you're still looking for blockers in these scenarios before you expand into connectors, hijack opening ace 3-0, still opening suited, but just the general way to widen. And here you have big blind defense. That's also pretty funny. If you're a big stack in the big blind in a high risk premium scenario, as a general rule, you can probably defend more than GPV in the same scenario. However, in order to make it work, in order to actually make money, you also have to be aware what to do post flop. And that's an entirely different topic. It's very long, but just as a primer, if you're a big stack and you call big blind and the other guy has a lot of risk premium versus you, you get to do a lot of leading. You get to do a lot of maybe unnatural pressure. So one thing to keep in mind is not just to go tomorrow and you're a big stack and you start calling everything, but sure, you can do that, but make sure to understand how to actually put the pressure on, because the strategy will be different. Yeah, no calling versus 3-bet is very easy to implement and makes your game so much easier. It's just, the other thing is no calling versus 3-bet when you're playing 4-bet fold also psychologically, I believe, impacts your position on the table pretty well, because somebody tries to 3-bet you and you 4-bet it, 4-bet jam, and if this happens 2 times, they're not going to be 3-betting you very light unless they're a maniac. But just in general, don't go 3-bets out of position. Yes, sir. Yeah, what we spoke of, short stack, and what Pentakiller brought up, a lot of people over defend their big blind. This is an 18 big blind stack facing a button open. This is the open, very straight up range. Just no calling, a lot of shoving. Even here, short stack, you don't want to be playing post flop because you have a risk premium on every street, right? So you have 18 bigs. A common thing for these stack sizes between 15 and 25. A lot of shoving, which you don't see in GPV in this section here, and it moves, depending on how wide the range is. It might go a bit higher, a bit lower, but you generally see a lot of shoving in the suited 10, suited 9x section between king 10, jack 10, king 9, 10, 9, etc. And then low aces, always good shoves, etc. No calling. Like the low suited combos just ain't good enough. The way that they are profitable in GPV is by marginal differences and by playing lines which you're just not going to be pulling off in a risk premium environment where you can't defend backdoors on the flop, etc., etc. How can you fall asleep after folding suited to min raise? It's all right. It's all right. If you keep getting better scores, you fall asleep just all right. Yeah, that's pretty much how you try to fall asleep. Uri Harrison. Always appreciate Uri Harrison memes. Such a legend. Hands, what time is it? I spoke for way too long, didn't I? Of course I did. I always do. All right. While I'm picking up hands here. Okay. Pavel, do we have the last null block?
Yes, we do. I will send you that one already.
All right. So the hand in question that we're gonna start with and see how it goes is Pandacularis hand, who's, you know, first come first serve sort of thing. So this is the hand, and these are the payouts. This is the hand. So we have a lot of 20-ish big blind stacks, final two tables. So 10 people left. There is a guy with no big blinds, 1.6 big blinds. Interestingly enough, it's not a huge pay jump though. Usually GG has really low pay jumps between 10th and 9th, something to be aware of. Very often you have like a 2 bind pay jump, or in like in higher stakes stuff, it's even more intense. It's like 3.5, 4 bind pay jump between 10th and 9th, something to be aware of. In general, so this is the spot. We have MP, or this is, in my book, this is hijack. So hijack open, button flats. We are in the small blind with 20 bigs, and we already see what happened, but if you could try to give me an honest answer what you do there, not being terribly biased. Do you think Queen Jack is a good reshove? What do you want to rip? We already know that we don't want to call. So question is what, yeah, you jam. Anybody else want to chime in? Do you think Queen Jack's strong enough? Do we want to non-all in 3-bet something? If you want to non-all in 3-bet something, obviously aces. What do you bluff with? All right, we got a sim. We got a sim. We got a sim to figure it out. Hijack open range, pretty normal. Blockers, etc. We got 3 sims. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Pavel knows because he ran them, because we don't have a server and I don't have internet and a computer. But we have Pavel. That's important. See, having Pavel is more important than having a server. Button opening, button calling, button not calling, but yeah, button response versus hijack open. And we can actually spend a little bit of time on this before we even get to what happens after that, because this is actually related to what we were speaking of in the presentation. Now, mind you, button here is, yeah, exactly. We're not expecting this guy to be calling with king, etc. But just in general, because it's like big stack versus big stack. Wait. Wait. Pavel, why does the hijack have 37 bigs, my friend? It's all right.
Oh
It's all
boy.
right.
Oh
We're
boy.
just looking at cutoff. We're just like cutoff has 90. We're just looking at cutoff. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, but
And
then the
that's a
no
different
blocks
strategy.
are not
Okay.
cool.
All right.
Damn
We
it.
started with the fact that we had a lot of issues. So it's only fitting that this seminar will have some sort of a mistake from our end. Sorry for that.
I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna fix that in post result. And
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we can try to take something from those.
we'll try to take something from this because it's a sim. Any sim is useful. It's actually a good thing to. Yeah. Okay. Let's for a second imagine that we're not looking at Pence's hand. We're looking at this hand here, which has 37 bigs opening, 36 button, 54. Like here, where we're deeper, high risk premiums, you actually don't see free betting. This is what we mentioned towards the end of the presentation. Because like big versus big, you're just playing super passive. Yeah. Yeah, because if you're like 40 bigs, and there is, remember, there is a 2 big blind stack. You don't see them here, but they are in here. Nope, other stacks. See, there is a 2 big blind stack. But yeah, if we are looking at this range, if you're small blind here again, so if you're small blind and you're playing again 20 bigs, but versus a range on the button, which is very protected, we can't shove queen jack. We can't shove tens because what will happen is the button is super protected. And however, if the button is not protected, this will naturally change. And we can actually, we have a node lock, and sure, it's a little bit of a confused sim, but it's still going to show stuff. For the sake of it, let's look at cutoff open, button call, very little calling, and small blind reshove. Queen jack is there, man. Queen jack is there. Barely. So we're looking at cutoff because it's the right stack size that we wanted to look at. Cutoff open, button very little calling, because if the button is facing a 20 big blind open, what they're trying to do is to just not allow them to realize equity. The field needs to take marginal spots. Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. But if we're facing this small calling range, we get this. And going to the node locked sim. So once again, this is not exactly the hand, but it will actually allow us to kind of answer the question, because what we have here is the node lock is for buttons responses. We wanted to node lock what happens if the button range, which here in the hijack versus button scenario had a lot of protection calling going on. So if we remove that, which is what the majority of people probably do, what happens to small blind? Oops, not this one, obviously. What happens to small blind is the range actually expands by. Funny thing is, the range is actually not expanding too much in terms of frequency, but it really moves in terms of combos. So again, that's a pretty good little heuristic there. You always want to be thinking about compositions. You want to be thinking about how people construct their ranges. And again, of course, we're not like, unless you possess white magic or any other type of magic, black magic, I don't know, you're not clairvoyant, so we don't exactly know ever, but we do see how people play, and we do see showdowns, and we can get information. We can try to think better. And here you have a prime example of that. So these two scenarios, 37 open, 36 call, we're in small blind with 20. Original sim, the button really wants to protect the calling range. Kings are pure call. And small blind is jamming this little box here, like queen, egg, queens, ace, queen, ace, jack, king, jack, jacks, and adding in some frequency of the blocker hands. If we node lock for button range, same scenario, hijack open, button call, but remove the main protective portion of the range, which is this one here, ace queen, squeeze actually here. Same frequency, but these are lost because now you're facing a much more condensed range versus which you go linear, instead of facing much more protected range versus which you go blockers for the lower equity portion of your jamming range. All of that makes sense. Sorry for screwing up your hand, man. Really. No idea, but we'll get it right. We'll get it right and we'll post it. Promise. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a close spot. It's a close spot, to be honest. Like, this guy is very tight, or I don't know how tight they are, but 17, if the little information that we have. This guy VP seems to be VPing a fair bit. Probably just opens. I don't know. It just feels so dumb to fold Queen Jack there. And yeah, probably the solver will fold it, to be honest. But the thing is, even if it was a fold, even if the solver thinks it's a fold, it's going to be very likely it's going to be like the fringe combo. It's going to be the first combo that folds type of thing. And I think if the mistakes that we're making are fringe mistakes in a solver, that's very good. Like, that is very high level stuff. That's the mistake. If we're making mistakes, we want to be making these mistakes.
And we have that one more no block, right?
Yeah.
Do you have it or?
No, you still haven't sent it to me.
I did.
No, you didn't. You did. You sure you did?
Discord?
No, not on Discord.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I got it. Don't send me nude pictures now that you know my email, please. I mean, depends, but
depends who.
Probably don't. I won't say anything, I'm gonna get busted for whatever, political incorrectness or something. Chicken seriously, yeah. Fair, man. Fair. All right. Waiting. While we're waiting, we can go here. We had a couple other hands posted. And we don't have solves, but we do have preflop academy. So we're going to try and solve that. Three-handed spot. 11, 17, 57. And I believe we have a very, very similar sim here. Where is it? Oop, there you go. Sure, the big blind here has 40 instead of 60, but the general dynamic is pretty much the same, where small blind is covered, button is the shorty who ends up folding. So let's see how it goes. Small blind first then. Let's see first if the limp is correct. And it seems like indeed with that sort of risk premium interaction where small blind has an almost 2 bounty power and 16% risk premium versus the big blind, whereas the big blind doesn't. Like, see, that type of thing is kind of,
I think we are the opposite stacks, right? The small blind is 40 and we are 20 on the big.
no.
Okay, it's
No, it's a limp spot.
Okay. Okay, am I?
Yep.
Yeah, because it
Button folds.
BB and yeah.
Yeah, button folds, small blind limps.
Sorry.
Yeah, so the limp is good, very little shoving, and if we face big blind ISO, this is what we do. So did you call? I don't know. Does it say if you called? Our buddy here called. What does it say? Calling here barn. No, that was the other one. What
We
does ICM
call
miser?
and-
The problem, yeah,
we
the
call and
problem with
win, right?
yeah, hopefully we call him win. The problem with ICM miser is that it's a push fold game. There is no approximation for post flop, so really it doesn't give you a whole lot, especially in terms of ICM, more complex scenarios. Using ICM miser is not going to yield the best results. There are a lot of solvers nowadays that are pretty good for solving ICM solutions that account for post flop too, like HRC beta, Munker does that, simple preflop has an ICM option. Like personally, like Pavo and myself have been using a lot of HRC beta recently just because it seems to be the fastest and they're working a lot on the engine. But ICM miser is just not functional in terms of capabilities, because that's why you're getting this ridiculous result, I think. And I don't know, like we can honestly, I'm not sure it's a three-handed spot. I can just try to run it right now. This is my laptop and I have no freaking clue if it's going to work, but I think it should, to be honest. Right? Should work.
Yeah. ICM.
Oops.
You did GPV. Yeah.
ICM. So it was 157, 105, 163. Okay. Next. Let's say 2 big blinds, whatever. Small blind, blah, blah, blah. Big blind versus small blind. Ooh, we need all ins, right? Need all ins everywhere. So this seminar is going to double down as a quick intro into HRC beta, which is actually pretty useful, I would say. So free betting, just make sure we put all ins everywhere. We need the all ins, right? I'm not just randomly sitting here typing stuff out.
And there's that all-in threshold, right? Which should put those all-ins to, I think. But
all right.
Yeah.
All right. Usually you want these to be relative, not the smallest numbers. This should be whatever. Tiny spot. Let's go. Sampling. Let's hope the seminar doesn't just drop while I'm solving sims on my laptop. And let's try like, I think we don't need too many iterations just because it's.
Yeah, it's small tree. We don't go.
All right.
Deep.
All right, that's not gonna happen. My laptop just told me that I have low system resources. Sorry, I'll just solve it and post it afterwards. But
let's just open the last one, the last notebook. And...
Yes, sir. But yes, going back to this one, this is what the big blind chip leader is doing, shoving in the middle portion, shoving low cards. This is very common for a big stack shoving into a smaller stack. You want to shove high-low combos in general. And yeah, this small blind strategy, we called it off and hopefully won. And then the other hand, which we had from that same tournament, we'll need to solve. But again, I think ICM miser will be off here, to be honest. To me, that seems like a jamming hand, probably. But maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm wrong.
Calling and folding, maybe. Is that the option, or not with that type of hand?
Call, he had ace-8 offsuit. Yeah.
Happens.
Friggin' nits, eh? Friggin' nits. Ace-8 offsuit. Are they even allowed to have ace-8 offsuit with 5 bigs on the button? I'm not sure, man. I don't feel like that's allowed. All right. So going back to this, I'll just open the original sim. Okay, so this was the original spot, and we're gonna look at the one that we have node locked. So it was 37, 36. Small blind play is this. Remember again, button range, very protected. And now we have a node lock which accounts for what we thought is a reasonable approximation of how many people would play in that spot, which is we see the linear top three betting, but we also see the calling. You know, some people might argue it's a bit extreme, although honestly, I don't think it's extreme. I think it's pretty reasonable. There is like, we didn't even add any 9x calling, etc. So let's see what happens now. And here you have a decent comparison, right? There you go. So this was the original spot, 20 bigs, 37 hijack open, 36 button call, very protected. Small blind getting it in, or like VPPing 7%. And then if we node lock an assumption that we have a slightly more linear three bet and calling a pretty solid, strong range, to be honest, calling. Small blind suddenly three bets almost 3% more, or gets it in. And again, a nice little funny thing with blockers, 8, 7, 6s, muck, 4s. Let's go, baby. And a little bit of non-line three betting, which pretty much comes always from what you would imagine, which is aces and either ace 4, ace 3 suited if your jamming range is going to be strong, or if you're jamming these, then it will be coming from somewhere in the offsuit region. It did make the mistake, the hand more interesting, Pavel. If that makes you feel better, yes, it's a fun hand. It's a fun hand. Whereas one of the node locks had like a completely bonkers strategy, which I really wanted to show. Yeah, this one. This one is so. This is an example of two things. One, a general ICM principle, but also two, how you can. It's very easy working with a solver to start doing things which you probably shouldn't be doing. Now, what we're looking at here, if you're wondering, that purple thing is an all-in shove from the big blind, and the big blind is just casually ripping it in with jack deuce, suited, and you know, everything. So what's going on here is hijack is still opening the same range, and we're looking at a button node lock that is lacking the original protection. And now the button calls and it gets to the big blind, and the big blind covers both of these guys, like the hijack and the button. And on top of the fact that the big blind covers them, they are also the mid stacks in the field. If you remember, if we go to, where are my screenshots? Screenshots. There you go. So if you remember, the field has all of these players in. And here we have the big blind who is staring at two of these guys right here when they have like 4 players below them still, and covers both of them, and the button range is not protected. And being the big blind there, what the solver wants to do is to just pile it in with every single hand which block calling ranges, because neither the hijack nor the button can actually stack off. And the hijack just stacks off jacks plus, pretty normal. The button, however, if they 3-bet linearly in this portion here, has no defending range. And you will see a lot of that if you play around with node locks. And I'm not saying go out tomorrow and start, you know, 3-bet jamming jack deuce suited every time when somebody has a capped range or a condensed range and you cover them. But what we're saying is be mindful of these sorts of things. And also another thing to be mindful of is that this is an insane solution, and it's very easy to produce a result like that in ICM because of how the model works. And it's an insane solution because it's a solution which assumes that this guy here is folding tens, ace queen. The other guy is like folding tens and nines and la la la, ace queen. And then if you go and now node lock this button range, very capped, lacks this, but just doesn't feel like folding all too much, and starts calling ace queen off and tens, then suddenly this madness here will just evaporate and it will go to no shoving. So there is a lot to explore with ICM, high risk premium scenarios, where you should always try to identify the spots where people are overdoing stuff or where people are playing very unbalanced strategies. And the more you think about it and the more you work with sims, the more you can actually find those spots in game, you know, because when you go through all of these sims and you understand how different interactions work, you just spot it in game because you're in there and you realize that somebody is in a spot where they must be protecting a calling range with like kings and queens and jacks and ace king suited, and you just know for a fact that that person is not going to do it. You can really go bonkers from behind. A really good example of that is Patrick Leonard has a course which is obscenely long, and I haven't seen all of it just because it's like friggin' 200 hours. But Pat is also an extremely good player, and he has really good stuff in that course, some of it. And there was a video in there about exactly that type of exploit where he was looking at a big stack open, an aggressive big stack 3-betting the wide open. You know, so he's assuming two aggressive big stacks where one is opening too much and the other, instead of playing very passively with calls, plays with a lot of 3-bets. What happened from people behind them is that you can, being covered by both, just rejump everything because the ranges were imbalanced. Just learning how ranges are supposed to be built and figuring out in-game imbalances in people's ranges is going to yield insane amounts of EV. Just as general ideas. Lots of blubbering, right? Range protection concept, yeah. Lots of blubbering. Does anybody have any questions? Or can we pull the curtains and go cry about our interesting broken sims?
Yeah, now everybody will get the double the answers, right? Because we have that one, and then I promised to deliver
it's actually
the
a
previous
bonus.
one, so it's kind of a bonus.
Yeah, it is a bonus. It's also a bonus that this seminar is being led by a friend's group, you know. This is, if you're wondering, I'm just sitting. My friend was kind enough to offer me his bedroom to run the seminar because my internet had a major outage. And Pavel, the hero that is, created a slideshow and sims. Ooh. Oh man, I don't know if I should say thank you or be like offended. Like, this is very good, you know, I got a compliment and a roast within like 2 lines. This is so good. You're like, I appreciate one. Balance. Very
Always.
GDO.
Always.
Very GDO. All right then.
All right. Yeah.
We're in the sweet spot, 1 hour.
60 minutes. Exactly.
Yeah. I know that Pavel loves it to be short and sweet and not overburdening, and that's the way to do it. Yes.
Yeah, nobody would watch the recording if it's longer. Although it's George speaking, so who knows? He might have some more fans over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty nice webinar. I guess we will have now a little break for the Scoop series. Of course, George will be grinding hard. I will try to get some other people to make some webinars, maybe. Mindset stuff comes to my mind because it's so important during the series. But yeah, we will see. I won't promise anything because during series it's always tough, but we'll see, we'll see. And yeah, thanks George for today. Always a pleasure to hear you.
Thanks for having me. Always fun. Always fun.
So yeah, guys, in case we don't see, each other. Good luck over the scoop.
And have fun. Remember to have fun.
Yeah, that's the most important part.
And take days off. Definitely take days off. You're not a
Don't-
machine. You
yeah.
can't play 28 days in a row. Take days off.
Yeah. You're gonna get better results for sure, and your mind will not blow.
And it's nice, in the majority of the, the West, like the Southern Hemisphere, it's summer, spring. It's the weather is nice.
Yeah, either that or if you wanna play every day, just play shorter sessions. That's also reasonable. But yeah, probably take at least Friday off and see your friends.
Yeah. All right. Now we're running a mindset seminar as well. All right.
Yeah. But Fridays might be a good day to play if you change the perspective.
Yeah. Maybe take Tuesday off. Maybe
Yeah,
take Tuesday off
or Thursday.
or Thursday.
Anyway, thanks guys for attending. And yeah, see you at the tables. Good luck at the tables. Crush the stereos. Bye bye.
Ciao.